I never imagined I'd be changing a millionaire's diapers in a coma. Then he wakes up and, it feels like the world just splintered into 1,000 shards. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. The hospital room was cold. Sterile. The hum of machines held my breath captive. I stood there, heart racing, as I faced the reality before me. Jackson Hart was not just any man, he was a legend, wealthy, powerful, flashing a smile that could melt ice. Now, he lay there, unmoving. The machines beeped, but those sounds felt like desperate pleas. I didn't know how to process this. I was supposed to be his caregiver, but now I was knee-deep in this twisted role. I could smell the antiseptic, feel the sweat pooling in my palms, and hear the whispers of nurses glancing at me with pity and disbelief. They thought I was nothing. Just a scared girl trapped in a nightmare, changing a man who once ruled his world. My thoughts drifted back to the summer we met. The laughter, the warmth, the nights filled with dreams. But fate had different plans. An accident changed everything. His sister was my friend. Brianna. She gathered us for dinner parties, where we crafted memories over pasta and red wine. I never thought I'd be here, a month later, wiping his brow, checking for fevers, nature's cruel twist giving me all the intimacy without the love. I felt like a ghost, hovering over his still form, touching him gently as if he could shatter with my every move. Each time I pressed the call button, I felt a wave of vulnerability wash over me. What if he never woke up? What if the world forgot the man he was? My chest tightened with every shuddering breath I took. I was terrified. I thought about his family, his friends. Would they blame me for this messy burden? I glanced at his peaceful face, wondering if he could hear me. I whispered my fears into the silence, hoping my words would somehow bridge the void. Then one evening, something shifted. I felt it in my bones, a crackle in the air. The machine's beeping took on an erratic rhythm. I rushed to his side. My heart thundered in my ears. Just as I thought I lost him for good, a finger twitched. My breath caught. Was it a fluke? For a terrifying moment, everything felt suspended as I held my own breath, watching, praying. Another twitch, then his eyelids fluttered. I froze, want to scream, cry, or run. And just like that, I stood on the edge of a precipice. Everything I knew started to unravel. What if he woke up confused, angry, trapped in a world that had moved on without him? My hands trembled as I brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. I felt hopeless and hopeful at the same time. How do you explain to someone they've been gone, lost in darkness while their empire toppled? And then he stirred. His eyelids opened, deep blue, like a forgotten ocean. I gasped, the air around me thick with unspoken words. The millionaire was waking up from his slumber, but what would he say? What would he remember? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The moment Jackson's eyes opened, the world shifted. The mechanical beeping of machines seemed to scream at me, demanding acknowledgement of the unspeakable truth. The man who had sat at the head of countless tables, his laughter echoing like a warmer sun, was here again, but lost somewhere in the shadows of his mind. Jack. I stammered, searching his gaze for recognition, hoping for a flicker of the man he once had been. His eyes darted around the room, confusion swirling within them like a tempest. My heart sank as I noticed the furrow of his brow, a stark contrast to the easy confidence he used to wear. It's me. It's Clara. He blinked. Once. Twice. The flickering joy I felt moments before dimmed as I noticed the fear overtaking his features, understanding replaced by uncertainty. Where am I? His voice, hoarse and unfamiliar, clawed at the walls of my resolve. It felt like a different man was speaking those words, a man trapped behind the fog of circumstance. I wanted to reassure him, to tell him that he was safe, but the truth was a slippery companion. "You're in the hospital," I said, my own voice trembling. "You had an accident, but you're awake now." Misery washed over me in waves, each crash declaring the reality that this wasn't the end but a new beginning, or perhaps just the start of another kind of torment. I watched as he processed my words, the confusion in his eyes deepening, searching for something, someone to anchor him. The silence in that room felt unbearable. Each second stretched, a taut string threatening to snap. "A accident?" He stuttered, his breathing quickening as panic painted his cheeks. "What happened?" I don't remember." There it was. The chasm I had feared was real. Had lost himself, his memories flying away like autumn leaves scattered by a storm. "It's okay," I whispered, stepping closer to take his hand in mine. I wanted to bridge that gap, to tether him to me, to make sense of this desolation. "You're okay. We'll figure it out together," but Jackson withdrew, pulling his hand back as if my touch burned. "I don't know you." With that simple statement, my heart shattered in a million pieces. I fought the urge to cry, to beg him to remember the laughter, the evening spent sharing dreams that felt so tangible. But I was lost in my own grief, a caretaker turned stranger in a moment. "I'm here for you," I choked out, trying to mask my betrayal of emotions. "I used to take care of you." His eyes narrowed, skepticism battling with the haze of confusion. "Used to?" I could see the walls building, heartache rising as he struggled against the creeping reality that he might not know anything of the man he was before the darkness. My pulse echoed in my ears, almost drowning out the surrounding sounds, a far too familiar alarm of panic. Then came the nurses, bustling in with their professionalism and practiced smiles. They asked him questions, tried to assess his condition. I was pushed aside, words and instruments swirling around me while my thoughts spiraled. An outsider in a room meant for his recovery. Desperation clutched at my throat as I stood on the periphery. In the chaos, I managed to steal a glance at him. Jackson met my gaze, his expression clouded. There was an aching vulnerability behind those ocean blue eyes, and an unfamiliar sense of loss echoed my own. He was grappling with a new reality, and I wasn't sure I fit into it anymore. As evening descended, I made my way to the small break room. My knees gave way as I sank into a chair, visions of our past swirling through my mind, a montage of laughter, glances held too long, and memories that now felt like dreams from another life. I collapsed against the table, tears spilling down my cheeks. A soft knock broke through my despair. I turned, discovering one of the nurses, a woman whose name I had not yet learned. She stood there, a gentle smile warming the edges of her eyes. "Hey, I brought you some water. It's important to stay hydrated," she said, her voice soothing like a balm against my pain. "Thank you," I whispered, taking the offered cup, grateful for even the smallest gesture of kindness. She leaned against the doorframe, empathy shining through. "It's tough, isn't it?" she murmured, her gaze distant as if she had walked similar paths. "You'll figure it out. He'll remember, or he'll find his way again. Just give it time." There was truth in her words. Hope fluttered inside my chest like a fragile bird, a flicker in the depths of my despair. Perhaps, just perhaps, Jackson would find his way back to me, find the pieces of himself that had been so cruelly scattered. But then, another nurse entered, the tension palpable as she handed me a note. "It's urgent. Jackson's sister is on her way. She knows he's awake." My stomach twisted. Brianna hadn't known how fragmented things had become. She was his family, his connection to the life he'd lost, while I had merely been a caretaker, a ghost clinging to the threads of their story. The fragility I felt pierced deeper than ever, feeding a growing fear. What if she resented me? What if my presence was just a reminder of what he was? As I stood frozen, the weight of the unknown pressed down upon me. I could only think of one thing: identity. Would I remain his ghost, or was our story something worth fighting for? That question hung in the air, unanswered, as a wave of certainty washed over me. I would need to navigate this tangled mess of memories and emotions, or risk losing him entirely. And just as that thought settled in my mind like a storm cloud, a sharp clatter echoed from Jackson's room, followed by a muffled shoyuta sound that rattled my very being, one that sent me racing toward the chaos unfolding behind sterile walls, where the boundaries between us were about to shatter once more. The chaos in Jackson's room was a cacophony that turned my blood cold. Alarm bells blared, and I could hear the echoes of frantic footsteps racing down the sterile corridor as I pushed through the door, my heart pounding with dread. Inside, the scene unfolded like a nightmare. Jackson thrashed on the bed, desperation etching lines on his previously serene face. The nurses surrounded him, their calm professionalism a stark contrast to the panic brewing within me. "Jackson, please. You need to relax," one shouted, trying to restrain him as he fought against the invisible bonds of confusion and fear. "Get away from me." His voice was fierce, raw with agony and uncertainty. It sliced through me, each word pinning me like a weight. In those moments, he wasn't just a man struggling with memory loss, he was an anguished soul wrestling with the void left in place of his former life. I stepped closer, my instincts screaming for me to reach out, to be his anchor amid the tempest. "Jackson. It's Clara," I shouted above the panic. "You're safe. You're in the hospital. Please, listen to me." For a fraction of a second, I caught his gaze, and something flickered fear mingled with recognition before he turned back to the nurses, his eyes darting. "Clara? Who is Clara?" he gasped, bewildered. I was not just a stranger, I was an enigma wrapped in sorrow, and the not knowing haunted him. "Just breathe, Jackson," I urged, my heart aching for him, for us. "You're going to be okay. We'll get through this." But then, the doctors entered, their authoritative presence cutting through the chaos like a knife. They moved swiftly, assessing the situation, speaking in quick, clipped sentences, their faces grave as they tried to calm him down. I was pushed to the back once more, left standing on the sidelines of what felt like his ultimate battle. As Jackson's shouting quelled and the staff worked diligently to stabilize him, I found myself grappling with an overwhelming sense of helplessness. I felt like a ghost waiting for my moment to be acknowledged, yet with every moment, the distance between us widened, each declaration of confusion sinking deeper into my heart. After what felt like an eternity, the room grew quiet, the frantic energy dissipating slowly as Jackson lay back on the bed, his breaths coming out in ragged gulps, exhaustion overtaking him. The nurses stepped back, giving him space, their faces filled with sympathy. "Let's take a moment," one of them said softly. "You did well, Jackson. It's tough adjusting." I moved closer, rounding the bed cautiously, my heart breaking anew as I saw him struggling to decode the emotions warring within him. "Jackson," I whispered, full of words unspoken, yearning for him to pull them from my heart, to simply recognize me again. His eyes met mine, and I felt that same flickering between us, one that felt like a desperate plea for connection woven with a thread of lingering fear. "Clara?" he whispered, the name tasting foreign on his tongue, like a forgotten melody. "Yes, it's me," I replied, relief washing over me like a tide. "I'm here," but just as hope began to lift me, the door swung open and in walked Brianna. Her presence felt like a tidal wave crashing across the fragile ground we had been walking upon. She was a force of nature, light and shadow intertwining in her expression, relief at seeing her brother awake, mingled with the unfamiliarity of his condition. "Jackson. Oh, thank God." She breathed, rushing to his side, completely oblivious to the reality of my place in his life. I was so scared that I stood frozen, watching their reunion, the way her hands grasped his with desperate tenderness. For all the moments we had shared, the moments I had cared for him, he seemed to instinctively turn toward her, the call of family resonating in a way that left me feeling like a relic, the one who tended to his wounds but never truly belonged to his past. "Who is this?" Brianna asked, casting a wary glance in my direction. The question hit me like a blow, and I felt the air siphon from my lungs. Would he remember me as merely a caretaker? A stranger, while his actual life wove around him again, full of connections I couldn't grasp. "2M Clara," I managed to say, the words catching in my throat. Brianna's eyes narrowed slightly. A spark of confusion played across Jackson's weary features as he looked between us, uncertainty raising its head like a serpent. She's someone from the hospital," he muttered, leaving me stranded in the interim between them. Suddenly, chaos erupted just outside the door. More doctors rushed in, and I barely caught a glimpse of Jackson's face, panic re-emerging as he shrank back from the intrusion. I could practically hear the thoughts racing through his mind. Who am I? What's happening to me? In that moment, realization struck me. Brianna was the lifeline he had been waiting for, and I appeared to be a shadow lingering longer than intended. I felt rooted, a spectator in a scene I had desperately wanted to shape. "Jackson, you're okay, I promise," Brianna said, her voice steady as she leaned closer. "I'm here now. We're going to get through this together." And there it was, a glimmer of hope for him that perhaps I didn't represent. The gravity of their bond was undeniable, and I took a fragile step back from the bed, a cruel wave of loneliness surging through me. But as I stood there, feeling smaller by the moment, I couldn't shake the words I had heard ringing in my ears, not just doubt, but an unexpected resolve that if I was going to fight for his memory, for the fleeting moments he had shared with me that had crafted a life in my heart, I would need to do so amid this new reality I was facing. This wasn't just about the past, it was about weaving a tapestry of hope for a future together. Suddenly, Jackson's gaze locked onto mine. There, within the swirling depths of disarray, I saw something shift, a faint recognition. Perhaps the softness of my presence was not lost to him entirely. But just as quickly as it appeared, the glimmer was extinguished when he looked away, back to Brianna, uncertainty clouding his features. The tug-of-war of memories had begun, and with it, my spirit wavered. A question hung in the balance, a question that pointed to the cliff of emotions upon which our lives teetered. Would I remain a ghost in his past, eternally out of reach? Or would I fight to reveal the truth of who we had been together? The door swung shut, sealing in the air thick with tension, and I stood there trembling on the edge, lost, with the terrifying question of what this new chapter would unfold looming larger than life. And just as I turned to leave, I felt a brush against my arm. It was the nurse who had offered me water earlier. "Clara, don't give up," she whispered, her voice laced with genuine concern. "You have every right to be here." Those words hung in the air, a fragile promise as I stepped away from the chaos of new beginnings, leaving behind a world that felt so complicated and fractious. But with each step, I could feel those questions deepening, wrapping around me like a chain, binding my heart to his, an inkling of a desperate fight to remain part of his story, no matter how jagged its edges appeared. Hope was a teetering flame, flickering in the face of despair. I walked the sterile halls of the hospital, my feet heavy, heart an ocean of uncertainty. The echoes lingered in my mind, the frantic cries, the overwhelming need for connection, and the bittersweet warmth of a distant recognition in Jackson's eyes. They all spun together like an intricate dance just out of reach, leaving me struggling to find my place. That I sat in the waiting area, glancing at the clock, its hands taunting me with their slow, deliberate movement. I knew I shouldn't lose myself in the darkness that threatened to envelop me, but the loneliness was suffocating. Brianna had stepped in, a radiant light to Jackson's disoriented darkness, and in that moment, I felt invisible again, another shadow cast aside, lost in halls filled with heartbeats I couldn't connect to, but the nurse's words of encouragement pulsed through me like a lifeline thrown into troubled waters. "You have every right to be here." I repeated them silently, allowing them to serve as armor against despair. I had fought for Jackson to have moments of clarity, and though it seemed my fight was against time itself, I wouldn't let his memories evaporate into nothingness. There were glimpses of hope in the small things. The nurse, Sarah, with her warm smile. A couple of orderlies who exchanged jokes as they wheeled by, their laughter almost musical against the backdrop of sterile silence. Even the way the sun caught the edge of the glass doors, painting golden stripes against the floor. I found myself drawn to these moments, holding on to them like a breath of fresh air, each potential kindness whispering that I wasn't alone in this struggle. After what felt like an eternity, I gathered the courage to head back to Jackson's room. The door loomed before me, the divide between his confusion and my hope stretched thin. I hesitated just outside, taking a moment to center myself, to breathe life into the trembling resolve that had anchored me in this whirl of chaos. Inside, I found Jackson still lying there, but this time his eyes were closed, the shadows heavier upon his face. Brianna, too, was there, sitting beside him, holding his hand as if it were the most precious artifact. I stepped back, willing myself to be merely a watcher, another piece of the puzzle that was now so familiar yet painfully distant. "Jackson," she murmured, her voice gentle like a lullaby. "Can you hear me? Just squeeze my hand if you can." That I watched, my heart clenching, as Jackson tightened his grip. A flicker of hope surged through me, yet I felt like an intruder in a moment that belonged to them. I could see the bond they shared, a fierce connection woven through years of shared memories that I was not a part of. But as she continued to speak to him, I felt the simmering fire of determination travel up my spine. I wasn't done fighting for him, for us. I had probably once held the keys to some of his memories, and perhaps I could find a way to unlock them once more. Quietly, I approached the bed again, my heart racing. "Jackson," I breathed, pouring every ounce of emotion into his name, hoping to bridge the gulf that had widened between us. "It's Clara. I'm here." His eyelids fluttered, and I caught a glimpse of the battle that raged within him, struggling, wishing to fight against the fog that clouded his mind. I laid my hand softly on his arm, the warmth of my palm juxtaposed against the sterile chill of the room. "You're not alone. You have me. You have so much love surrounding you." As if guided by my voice, his eyes opened slightly. There it was again, that flicker, reminiscent of the warmth I once knew. 1,000 emotions danced behind his cerulean gaze: pain, confusion, recognition, each entangled with the fear of what lay ahead. I saw him fight against the chains that held him, and suddenly amidst his turmoil, I was lost in the depths of those eyes, fighting my own emotions. But before he could form a reply, the door swung open, and in strode a tall man with salt and pepper hair and an air of undeniable authority. "I'm Dr. Simmons," he introduced himself with a decisive nod. "How's our patient doing today?" I stepped aside, allowing him to examine Jackson, though a wave of apprehension washed over me. I wanted to push aside the intrusive presence of another authority figure in this delicate thread of moments. Jackson maintained a stoic silence, a facade of calm forged from the turmoil inside him. As the doctor detailed Jackson's condition, Brianna remained quiet, her focus solely on Jackson. I stood there, but the weight of my presence began to feel burdensome. Was I acting as a supportive force or an impeding one? "Maybe tomorrow, you can try and see if he remembers anything specific," Dr. Simmons suggested, noting the subtle signs that perhaps Jackson could respond to deeper questions. "Well, begin to gently revive the memory processes. It can take time, but we hope for progress." As they began to discuss procedures, I felt a sickness rise in me. What if he didn't remember me at all? What if his mind abandoned the memories we'd built together? What if my place in his life was to be erased entirely, rendered just a whisper carried off by the wind? Desperate to maintain my connection, I leaned in closer. Despite the chaos, I had to be the one to light the path ahead. "Jackson, I know you're in there," I urged softly, my voice breaking through the clinical exchanges. "We shared so much together. Trust that I'm here to help you find your way back." That he turned his head slowly to me, his features strained, yet there was something softer in his gaze. Even with the turmoil around us, in that moment, a part of me dared reach out with a fragile hope, a tentative belief that maybe, just maybe, he would see past the fog and remember. But before he could respond, the lights flickered ominously, casting eerie shadows across the room. A sudden alarm blared just outside, sending a wave of panic rippling through the healthcare staff. Dr. Simmons turned toward the source, voice raised. "What's happening?" I felt my heart race as chaos unfolded. The bed shaking slightly beneath us, the nurses hurrying past as the lights flickered again, plunging us into momentary darkness. Was it an emergency? Or a sign, perhaps, of more trouble ahead? Before I could process it fully, the power seemed to falter, and with that flicker, a new wave of dread washed over me. Then I heard its shrill alarm cutting through the atmosphere, announcing something profound and alarming. "Code Blue. Room 312. Echoed down the hall, piercing through the tumult of confusion. In that instant, all our fates seemed to hang on a precipice, my connection to Jackson feeling tenuous in the face of an unexpected unfolding chaos. Clutching his arm, I realized that the tenderness still existing in our space could be the very shield we needed for the uncertainty ahead. I was here, I was fighting, and somehow, I had to believe he was too. But that flicker of recognition was now entangled with fear, the kind that sent a shiver down my spine, reminding me that our journey had only just begun. The room buzzed with anxious energy, the suddenness of the code blue crashing into the moment like a tidal wave. Time stretched, hardening the air between us while I held on to Jackson, feeling the warmth of life beneath my fingertips in stark contrast to the rising panic enveloping us. My heart raced, pounding in my chest as I scanned the surroundings, searching for a sign of what had just started to unravel. "Stay here, Clara," Brianna urged, her voice shaky but resolute as she turned to the nurse on duty. "What's happening?" The nurse's face was a mixture of concern and urgency, her brows knitted in concentration. "We don't know yet. Just a precaution, but we need to clear the area." She glanced at Jackson, and I noticed her determination to ensure no chaos interrupted our fragile moment. With tumult outside the door, the world beyond felt far removed from the two of us in that room. I could almost hear the cacophony of frantic footsteps rushing by, the tug of muffled voices stirring up memories of how I had once loved little more than the quiet of moments shared with Jackson. "Jackson," I whispered urgently, desperate for a response as my mind circled racing thoughts of what this meant for us. I leaned in even closer, feeling that strange familiarity with the man who lay before me, suspended between two worlds. "Please, if you can hear me, squeeze my hand." He remained still, his brow furrowing slightly as if he were lost in a thought I couldn't fully grasp. The realization that I was no longer fighting this battle for myself, but for him, cinched tightly around my heart. I needed him to find his way back, not only for him but for both of us. Dr. Simmons returned then, his expression now serious, eyes alight with urgency. "Clara, I need you to step outside for a moment." His tone was firm, though compassionate. Jackson stirred slightly, and I could feel the glue that bound us begin to crack under the pressure of it all. "No," I insisted, shaking my head vehemently. "I can't leave him. Not now." Panic rose in me as the thought of being separated from him launched a fresh swell of fear. What if this was our last moment together? "Please," Dr. Simmons offered, his voice softer now. "We have to check on the other patient. It's going to be okay, but it's a process. I need you to trust me." Brianna stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Clara, I'll stay with him. You need to step outside for a moment." I won't let anything happen. That I hesitated, but the flame of hope flickering within me was tethered to both Jackson and Brianna's assurance. I had no choice but to allow a quiet surrender wash over me, and as I stepped backward toward the door, the intangible threads preserving our connection tethered me still. Just as I reached the threshold, a sudden shout echoed from the hall, a man's voice laced with urgency. "Call for backup. We need more hands." The hairs on my arms rose, fear clawing at my throat as I stepped into a world where uncertainty hung palpable in the air. Brianna's voice cut through the noise as she whispered reassurances to Jackson, her words tying our destinies together across the unseen chasm that had opened. That I stood in the dim light of the hallway, my heart racing as fingertips grazed the closed door, holding my breath as if that could suspend time itself. Minutes passed, perhaps seconds, or hours, each tick of the clock drawing me deeper into my thoughts, solidifying the urgency of our situation. A nurse approached, her brow wet from sweat, and my heart sank at the sight. "We lost the other patient," she said, eyes darting toward me. "I'm sorry. But they've transferred Jackson to critical care on account of his vitals fluctuating. I'm not sure what this means for him yet." Those words fell like stones in my chest, a mix of fear and despair threatening to crush the remnants of hope I held tightly. I was losing him before my very eyes, and every second pulled me further away from what I had clung to, love that had kindled within me despite the storm of the past few days. Just then, amidst the chaos, I felt a hand gripping my arm, a comforting presence. It was Sarah, the nurse who had offered me words of encouragement earlier. Her eyes held a genuine warmth that reached beyond the sterile confines of the hospital. It's hard to witness this, hard to be in that room, she said softly. But you're doing your best, Clara. That love you have for Jackson, it carries weight. You're fighting for him, aren't you? I nodded, tears welling in my eyes. I am. I have to believe he's still in there. You're right to believe, she stated firmly. And often in moments like this, unexpected things can happen. Perhaps if these memories are tucked away, they might just need the right spark to ignite. A flicker of hope blossomed inside Meth, thought that perhaps there could still be a way back. Life is unpredictable, and amid the haze, sometimes love creates the clearest path of all. Thank you, I whispered, buoyed slightly by her kindness. But just then, another alarm blared through the corridor, the sound setting off caution lights and drawing my focus back to the room. Without thinking, I rushed back through the door and froze. There was Brianna, eyes wide as she glanced at the monitors, her concern palpable. Jackson's heart rate was flattening, the beeping replacing the lullaby of our earlier connection. Clara! Brianna yelled, her voice cutting through the chaos. I watched as Jackson's chest began to heave, his body straining against an invisible force that contorted him with effort. No! Hold on, please! I cried out, racing to his side. But as I reached him, the world blurred around us. And in that terror-soaked moment, as time slowed, Jackson's eyes met mine one last time. They were filled with a sense of panic, of helplessness, and a flickering. Was it recognition, or was it simply fading light? As I gripped his hand tighter, my heart cracked wide open, pouring everything I had into that singular moment: love, fear, desperation, all crashing together, reshaping our fates irrevocably. And then, just as suddenly as the alarms had sounded, Jackson's heart rate escalated once more, spilling into a cacophony of uncertainty, swirling in the realm of emotion, a confusion rising like smoke from the ashes of what had become. What lay ahead remained unknown, but as I gazed into the depths of his eyes, a new worry crept into my soul, the realization that if he woke, nothing might be as I remembered. The air in the room was thick with tension, pressing against my chest as I felt the life within my grasp teeter between existence and oblivion. As I held Jackson's hand, time seemed to fracture, each second extending into an eternity of uncertainty. My heart echoed with questions I dared not voice, fearing the very fabric of my hopes would tear if I said them aloud. Jackson, I urged softly, desperation weaving through my words, please come back to me. We have so much left to do. The memories of our laughter, the quiet evenings filled with the warmth of shared whispers, flooded into my mind. I desperately needed those moments to return. They were the lifeblood of my connection to him. Brianna stayed beside me, her presence a comforting anchor. The chaos of doctors and nurses swirling around us faded into the background as I focused solely on Jackson, praying for that flicker of life to reignite. But with each passing moment, doubt nagged at the edges of my mind like a persistent storm cloud threatening to unleash its downpour. Suddenly, without warning, Jackson's body began to convulse, snapping me back to the present. Panic surged through me, and I looked at Brianna, who was already signaling furiously to the medical team. I squeezed Jackson's hand tighter, as if my grip could tether him back to reality. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. I cried, each plea resonating with unbearable urgency. As the medical team rushed in, I was escorted to the back of the room, the frantic energy pulsating around me with relentless intensity. My mind raced with anguish, thoughts spinning wildly. What if this was it? What if I lost him now? Clara, Brianna said gently, bringing me back to the moment amidst the chaos. I turned to see her eyes filled with concern, yet a steadfast light that soothed my frayed nerves. You need to breathe. He's fighting, that means he's still here with you. Breathe. The word echoed in my mind like an incantation. I focused on it, pausing for just a heartbeat, feeling my pulse steady as I drew in a deep breath, letting it out slowly. I have to believe he's fighting for us. The clinical noises subsided, the frantic pace slowing just a fraction as I leaned against the wall, drawing strength from the reassurance that somehow, deep within, Jackson still needed me. I caught sight of Sarah again, who approached with an urgency in her demeanor. Clara, I wanted to let you know that they're stabilizing him, she said, a flicker of hope igniting in her eyes. It's not over yet, but as the words sank in, uncertainty gripped me once more. I remembered hearing Brianna say that Jackson's family had deep pockets, a kind of influence that could shift tides in ways I had never encountered. The reality of that privilege was dawning on me in a way that felt surreal, bringing with it both envy and confusion. I had fought for so long to carve out a space in his life, yet here I was, unsure of where precisely I stood in the intricate web of Jackson's world. As the team worked frantically to stabilize him, I felt an unexpected wave of vulnerability wash over me. The weight of this invisible burden, knowing he was connected to a legacy far greater than the love we shared, felt overwhelming. What if his coming back meant returning to a world where I no longer belonged? Through the haze of the moment, the door swung open again, and in walked an imposing figure in a crisp suit. Jackson's father, a man I had seen only in passing, a man whose mere presence seemed to dim the room with unrelenting authoritative energy. "Where's my son?" he demanded, scanning the area with a fierce intensity, his voice a harsh whisper that felt almost like a physical blow. I shrank in on myself, the air thickening with tension. "He's in critical condition," Sarah replied, her tone steady. "We're doing everything we can." Jackson's father turned, eyes locking onto mine with a penetrating gaze. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his tone icy, as if questioning whether I had any right to be part of this moment. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. All I could manage was a frantic shake of my head, feeling exposed under his scrutinizing stare. Would he see his son's life through his wealth and status, or recognize the depth of love I held for his child? Brianna stepped forward, a protective barrier between me and Jackson's father. "Clara has been here for Jackson through this whole ordeal. She loves him." Love. The word hung heavy in the air, casting a warm glow in contrast to the chaos swarming around us. But would it be enough? The silence stretched, heavy like a blanket, as I searched Jackson's father's face, looking for the slightest sign of understanding. Instead, there was only hardness. "That I don't need anyone's love or theatrics," he snapped with an edge that brought the tension back to a fever pitch. "What I need is for my son to wake up." My heart sank. The rawness of his pain collided with my vulnerability, weaving an intricate tapestry of desperation and fear. An unknown future loomed ahead, and for the first time, I felt real doubt about whether love alone could bring him back. Just then, a frantic shout echoed through the room, and my heart raced as I turned in its direction. "Code Blue!" A voice rang among the commotion, sending a fresh wave of horror crashing over me as the atmosphere shifted once more. Jackson's heart was it teetering again? I grasped Brianna's arm, her expression mirroring my fears as we both surged forward. I needed to see him. I needed for him to know I was right there, no matter how chaotic the world outside grew. As the team surged into the room, readying for yet another clash with fate, an unanticipated shudder rippled through me. The taste of dread tarnished all thoughts on the edges of possibility. Jackson's father remained rooted in place, anguish painting his features, and I realized that whatever reclamation of love we could strive for was not only tied to Jackson but to the complicated narrative shared amongst all those present. In that single, fragile second, a weight uncoiled in my chest, revealing an unexpected truth. Perhaps love, no matter how powerful, couldn't truly conquer all. But it was the resolve of faith in its battle that shaped our path forward, whether I was included in Jackson's story or not. And just as the cacophony of alarms amplified, a startling revelation echoed within me. The next moment would redefine everything we believed, shattering illusions and rebuilding them anew. As Jackson's heart rate spiked on the monitor with each alarm, my breath caught in my throat. Would he wake to a new reality, one that potentially separated us forever, or bring us closer than we ever imagined? The mere thought was electrifying, plunging me deep into a sea of uncertainty. In that moment, it was clear everything was at stake, and love would ring out, but the outcome remained cloaked in enigma. The scent of antiseptic lingered in the air as I leaned against the cool wall, time slipping away with each agonizing tick of the clock. My heart thudded heavily in my chest, the chaotic noise of clattering instruments mingling with the rhythmic beeping of Jackson's monitors. I could feel the weight of uncertainty pressing down upon me, a leaden cloak that refused to let go. Despite the turmoil, a flicker of hope ignited within me. Jackson was still fighting, I could feel it. He wasn't just holding on, he was wrestling with the darkness that threatened to swallow him whole. Every breath he took, shallow and strained, was a reminder of the love that tethered me to him. Yet the icy glare from his father brought a chill that snuffed out my warmth occasionally, consuming any comfort I grasped. "Clara," Brianna said, her voice urgent but soft, breaking through my thoughts. "You need to step outside for a moment. It's getting too intense in here." I shook my head, unwilling to leave him, but she continued. "We can't do anything right now. You need to breathe, clear your mind, even if it's just for a few minutes." With a reluctant sigh, I pushed off the wall. Each step toward the waiting area felt like a betrayal. How could I leave him even for a split second? But Brianna's grip was firm, and her eyes promised strength I didn't have. As we stepped into the quieter corridor, the harsh fluorescent lights flickered overhead, illuminating an almost surreal atmosphere. I leaned against the cool surface of a glass partition, half listening as Brianna spoke of mundane things, her latest shifts, the weather, the latest news headlines. She was reaching for anything that could distract me from the impending dread, but all I could focus on was Jackson, his warmth, the feel of his laughter reverberating through the space between us. "Do you think he'll be okay?" My voice trembled, barely a whisper against the sterile backdrop. Brianna turned, her eyes searching mine. "That I have to believe he will," she replied, her confidence unwavering, even if my own was fraying. "He's a fighter, and you've given him reason to pull through." Those words hung in the air, like a lifeline thrown into a stormy sea. I needed them, even as doubt crept back in. What if he awoke and chose a life that didn't include me? The reality that he might hardly remember our connection gnawed at me with relentless claws. Suddenly, the door swung open, and a nurse rushed out, her face a mask of urgency. "We're having some challenges in there. It's getting intense again." Without hesitation, Brianna grabbed my wrist, pulling me into a sprint back to Jackson's room. Each step urged forward by fear, a silent prayer pleading that we wouldn't lose him now. The sight that met us crushed the hope momentarily blossoming. Jackson lay unconscious, his form surrounded by shadows of the medical team as they fought to stabilize him once more. Agitated voices filled the air while alarms blared like sirens tearing through the fabric of the room. I approached slowly, instinctively reaching out for his hand, but was stopped by Brianna's arm, the fear in her eyes compelling me to stand back. "Let them work, Clara," she urged, her voice steady against the chaos. "They know what they're doing." An hour felt like a century as I stood on the precipice, watching Jackson being pushed further away from me. I could see the beads of sweat collecting on his forehead, the colors of his skin shifting as life and death danced dangerously close to each other. In that fraught moment, Jackson's father re-entered, snatching my attention instantly. He strode in, his face a storm cloud, but I could see the cracks of raw emotion barely concealed beneath his hard exterior. It struck me with a shock. I felt a flicker of empathy for him. Here we were, equally lost in our fears, albeit on different sides of the emotional spectrum. "Is he going to be okay?" he demanded, his voice breaking with the fragility of a father's worry. I hesitated, unsure of my position. This wasn't my place to speak, yet his impassioned plea struck deep, unveiling an unexpected kinship in the chaos. "He's fighting," I replied, mustering what little conviction I had. "He's stronger than we think." Though he didn't respond, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, a glimpse of the humanity buried beneath the weight of expectation and status. Then, something changed. A sudden silence descended, the alarms fell quiet as the medical staff focused on Jackson's heart monitor. The rhythmic beeping became erratic, the sound tearing through me like jagged glass. Panic rippled through the room. My fingers curled into Brianna's arm again, as if she could hold my pulse steady. "Get the crash cart," someone shouted, and the air thickened with impending dread. "Clara, don't look," Brianna urged again, but I felt drawn to him, as if Jackson's spirit reached out, tethering me closer as darkness encroached. And then it happened. A voice broke through the chaos, clear and commanding. "We need to shock him." As I stood there, time slowed down, and while I wanted to look away, my heart demanded I remain steadfast. They brought forward a paddling device, and before I could grasp the gravity of the moment fully, shape upon shape melded together, the air electric with expectancy. Would this be the moment that returned him to me, or would it irreparably change everything for us? Clear. The room reverberated with that single word, and my breath hitched as I glanced into Jackson's face. His features twisted slightly, and a vision struck memories spent together, laughter spilling like honey, a life carved together. Then, with a flash that lit the room, the paddles connected with his chest. To my surprise, the impact didn't just ripple through his body. I felt it surge through me as well, a jolt of energy that echoed with desperate hope. But the second stretched longer than I'd ever known as we waited with bated breath, caught in an excruciating limbo, each heartbeat reverberating in my ears, waiting for the moment he would either come back to us or slip away forever. And when the monitor finally beeped again, steady and strong, it was a sound that reverberated with new potential. Relief washed over me, but it was quickly followed by a sinking realization. Jackson's eyes fluttered open, but with them came a haunting question. Would he remember me? Would he wake up as the man I loved, or as someone entirely different? As he looked around, confusion etching itself into his features, I felt my heart race anew. The air swirled with uncertainty, and I knew in that moment that everything had irrevocably shifted. I couldn't predict the road that lay ahead, but one thing was clear: our lives had entered a new chapter, one filled with possibilities, unknowns, and perhaps a deeper challenge than I had ever anticipated. And just as I braced myself, a surprising glimmer caught Jackson's eye, a flicker of recognition, or perhaps disbelief, before he spoke the words that would forever change the trajectory of our lives. "Clara, where am I?" The sterile scent of antiseptic was suddenly overpowered by the rush of my pulse, pounding like a drum of mixed emotions: relief, confusion, fear, all spiraling into a chaotic symphony as Jackson's voice broke through the haze. "Clara, where am I?" His question hung in the air, heavy like a weight pressing down on my chest. The moment stretched, each ticking second amplifying my dread. I wanted to tell him everything, to weave a tapestry of love and memories that surrounded us like a warm embrace. Yet all that flooded my mind were the fragmented glimpses of a life we had built together, the powerful connection I feared might be lost in the abyss of his unconsciousness. "Jackson." My voice cracked as I gathered the courage to step closer, my heart hammering like a panic-stricken bird. "You're in the hospital. You had an accident. But you're okay now. You fought through, and you're awake." His brow furrowed, confusion painting his features. "An accident?" he echoed, and it stung like a cold wind against my warmth. "Yes," I urged, willing him to grasp the gravity of the moment. You were really hurt, Jackson, but you're here now." "I'm here." That I reached for his hand, my fingers trembling as they connected with the warmth of his skin. Yet he didn't squeeze back, and I felt the weight of that moment crumpling around me. I searched his eyes for signs of recognition, a flicker of the love we shared, but all I found was an empty expanse, a blank canvas where vibrant colors should be. The nurse, her presence having been reduced to a shadow behind me, took a cautious step forward, her own concern smothering the brief euphoria. "Mr. Dalton, can you tell us your name?" she asked, her voice steady, but I could hear the urgency lying just beneath the surface. "Jackson," he replied hesitantly, as if testing the name on his tongue. Jackson Dalton. Relief lit up the nurse's face, but it did little to ease the storm thrashing against my heart. The memories, the inside jokes, our moments together, all of it hung precariously, potentially washed away by the waves of amnesia crashing over him. This was supposed to be the moment of his triumph, the turning point after such despair, yet I stood paralyzed by the fear of him not remembering me. His father emerged from the background, a specter cloaked in sternness, but I recognized the tremor of uncertainty lurking behind his stoic facade. "What else can you remember, son?" he pressed, eager yet demanding, as if the desire to reclaim his son's greatness eclipsed any concern for the emotional ramifications at play. Jackson's face scrunched in concentration, and I heard the thin veil of desperation in his voice. I don't know." His words slipped away like sand through fingers, leaving only a haunting silence. A moment later, Jackson locked eyes with me, and I could feel the heaviness of expectation looming like a storm cloud. "Clara?" he said, the name tasting foreign on his tongue, and I felt my breath hitch with a mix of hope and anxiety. "You're my girlfriend?" The question danced between us, rife with uncertainty. Yes. I affirmed, the fervor in my voice a thin breath against the rising tide of my emotions. We've been together for years, Jackson. You're my everything, everything, he repeated, his brows still furrowed, grappling with this new reality. I wish I could remember. A lump swelled in my throat, constricting the words I longed to say. It's okay. Well, get through this together, I whispered, though the truth felt heavier than my hopeful promise. How could I make him remember the bond that had tethered us? How would I rebuild the intimacy of our love if he couldn't grasp even a fragment of it? The tension in the room was suffocating, and just when I thought the fragility of the moment would shatter, his father broke in again, his voice cold as ice. You should focus on your recovery, Jackson. What's important now is getting you stronger. That tone cut through the hope I clung to, a chill creeping into my heart. I flinched at the urgency in his words, at the reminder that this moment wasn't just a gentle awakening, but a battle for Jackson's identity, one that could redefine us. That I remained glued to his side, squeezing his hand tighter, searching for signs of the boy who had held my heart so fiercely. You're strong, Jackson, stronger than you know. Remember the things we talked about? Your dreams, our plans. He echoed blankly, and the fragility of the moment teetered on the brink of despair. As he cast his gaze to the corner of the room, I wished desperately for anything that might spark a flicker of recognition. In that desperate silence, with my heart in pieces scattered across the floor, something unexpected occurred. A nurse hurried through the door, an expression of both urgency and excitement illuminating her features. Mr. Dalton, we need to check something, she said quickly. There's been a development. The word struck like lightning, sending ripples of anxiety through me. I felt Brianna behind me, her silent support mingling with the tension, but my thoughts were racing ahead. What could it possibly be? Jackson's father stepped aside, annoyance edging out his concern. What do you mean? What about him? I can't explain now, the nurse replied, glancing at Jackson. But there's an unexpected update regarding the accident. We might need your input, Mr. Dalton. Jackson looked at me, uncertainty flashing across his face. Clara, what's going on? Before I could answer, a sinking feeling took hold of me. Was this newfound clarity about his accident a revelation, a piece of the puzzle that held the truth we had yet to uncover about what had happened to him? And what secrets loomed just beyond the knowledge of his own family? With my heartbeats matching the rhythm of anxiety thrumming in the air, I braced myself for whatever was about to unfold, aware that our journey was nowhere near completion. The path ahead was shrouded in shadows, and in that moment, with Jackson still lost beneath layers of memory and reality, I couldn't shake the apprehension that the worst was yet to come. The sterile ambience of the hospital room began to blur as my world spun. Jackson stared at the nurse, his expression a mix of confusion and fear, mirroring the chaos within me. What could the development mean? My heart raced, entangled in worry. Was it possible that this news would push him further away from me, or would it finally grant him the clarity he so desperately needed? Mr. Dalton, if you could follow me, we can discuss this in private, the nurse urged, gesturing towards the door before glancing back at me. A fleeting moment of understanding passed between us, as if her eyes were saying everything I was too scared to voice. It's important. You'll want to know. Where are you taking him? I managed to choke out, desperation creeping into my voice. They'll explain everything in a moment, Clara. I promise he'll be okay. The nurse's soothing words felt like a fragile thread I clung to. Without waiting for Jackson to respond, the nurse gently guided him through the door, leaving me standing at the edge of uncertainty. I felt a swell of abandonment, my heart sinking into the pit of my stomach as they disappeared down the corridor. I could hear faint echoes bouncing off the walls, but the sounds morphed into muffled whispers, amplifying my anxiety. The clock on the wall ticked louder, 1-3 beats echoing in a cruel rhythm as I paced back and forth, my mind racing with apprehension and doubt. Each step felt heavier, laden with memories of the moments we had shared, lazy afternoons at the park, laughter cutting through the quiet, late-night conversations under the stars. Would those moments be lost forever? I was still caught in this whirlpool of despair when Brianna appeared beside me, her face etched with concern. Clara, she began gently, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. He's going to be okay. He woke up. That's the first step. You know that, right? I forced a smile, though it trembled at the edges. It's not that easy, Brianna. What if he doesn't remember me? What if he doesn't want to? I thought waking up would mean I don't know, I admitted, voice cracking, that everything would go back to normal. But I can feel it slipping further away. Brianna squeezed my shoulder tighter. You're not alone in this. You've always fought for him. Just keep on fighting a bit longer. As we stood in silence, horror and hope mingled like an intricate dance, before the door swung open again, snapping me back to reality. The nurse returned, a seriousness overshadowing her usual warmth. Jackson would like to speak with you now, she said. That I rushed forward, my heartbeat quickening as I followed her into the room, only to halt abruptly at the sight before me. Jackson sat on the edge of the hospital bed, pale and fragile, though a spark of determination flickered in his eyes. Hey, I breathed out, relieved yet anxious, each syllable a fragile offering hovering between us. Clara, he replied, the name still lingering on his lips as if it were something to be unwrapped. I need to know what happened. The way he locked his gaze onto mine set my heart racing anew. There was an accident, Jackson. A car crash. You were. The words caught, choked back by the gravity of it all, but Jackson's eyes implored me to continue. That I was at the hospital and now I'm here. But the details, they're so muddled. Brianna said you lost consciousness. My voice trailed off, overwhelmed by the need to protect him from the truths that could hurt more than the accident itself. That I can't remember anything. I just know my father is worried about me, and so is everyone else. But what did I do? What have I done? His voice quivered, raw and exposed, as if the mere act of questioning made him feel guilty for being alive. A lump rose in my throat, and suddenly, I felt the weight of the world pressing down on me. Expectations of others, the fear of the unknown swirling in the air. You haven't done anything wrong, Jackson. You were just in the wrong place at the wrong time, I urged, but the truth echoed with less certainty than I wished. Someone else couldn't have been so lucky, he muttered, his eyes drifting to the window. What if I'm the cause of someone's pain, Jackson? I started, but he cut me off, his expression hardening as he turned back to me, the shadows of guilt twisting his features. You don't understand. There was someone else in the car. I need to know, were they okay? A chill ran down my spine. The truth felt like a knife buried deep within me, waiting for the right moment to pull it free. We were in a car crash, he pressed. There was someone else, wasn't there? Tell me what happened. There was desperation laced in every word, urging me closer to the precipice, to the tragedy and the pain I was trying so hard to protect him from. The fact he didn't remember felt like a double-edged sword. I could keep this truth from him, shrouding his mind in blissful ignorance, or I could lay everything bare and risk tearing his heart further. The scales tipped precariously between honesty and protection. I don't know much, I finally confessed. But you were hurt, and another person was in critical condition. Before I could finish, the nurse returned, interrupting the moment. Brianna stepped in behind her, as if sensing the intensity pooling between us. The nurse knelt beside Jackson, her expression softening. There are still questions to answer, Mr. Dalton. I understand you're eager to know more, but now isn't the time. You need to focus on your recovery first, she stated, the authority in her voice silencing the storm brewing within him. Jackson's frustration morphed into anger, his fists clenching at his side. Why can't anyone just tell me what happened? I deserve to know. His voice lost the tremor, replaced instead with a fierce determination that sent chills down my spine. That moment, I felt trapped within a storm of emotions, a whirlwind of hope and despair, frustration and tenderness. I could only stand there, torn between his need for answers, the nurse's wisdom that urged caution, and the delicate threads of my own heartstrings that tugged, pulling me deeper into an emotional labyrinth. As the nurse glanced at me, caught in the chaos of Jackson's needs and my silent pleas, I sensed the burden of truth weighing heavily in the air. Brianna's hand slid into mine, grounding me in that moment, though the panic loomed ever closer. What if what lay ahead was far worse than I had dared to imagine? Jackson's gaze met mine, and in that instant, fear pooled in the depths of his eyes, mirroring my own. Clara, please. You have to tell me the truth, he urged, each word trembling with urgency, but before I could respond, my phone buzzed violently in my pocket as a message alert flickered to life, cutting through our fragile moment like a lightning bolt. My heart raced as I glanced at the screen, dread coiling around my chest as I read the name of the sender. It was his family lawyer. And the message read, "We need to talk. It's urgent." For an instant, the weight of everything shifted. What had I been so terrified to uncover? What truth loomed on the other side of this conversation that could forever change us? And even as I stood there, the world holding its breath, I couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The hospital room was still, haunted by the echoes of uncertainty and fear. Jackson's gaze was fixed on me, raw with emotion, waiting for words that felt heavy on my tongue. I had spent so many sleepless nights hoping for this moment, and now that it was here, the weight of his question bore down like a mountain on my chest. Could I tell him the truth? Did I have the strength to break the silence that wrapped around both of us with suffocating tenderness? Before I could plunge into the depths of honesty, his father stepped closer, shadows lingering at the corners of his sharp features. What urgent matters could possibly rest on your shoulders at a time like this? He glanced at the nurse, who had taken a cautious step back, preparing for the impending conversation. "I need to speak with Clara," Jackson stammered, bringing the conversation back to the urgency of our own turmoil. Muffled tones of chaos swirled in the distance, the stark reminder of his reality, but in that moment, nothing else mattered except for what lay between us. There was someone else, wasn't there? The urgency returned, his voice strained, echoing with trepidation. "Tell me, Clara. I can handle it." My grip on his hand tightened, a silent anchor in the storm raging within me. I sensed the tenderness of our connection, a fragile thread tethering us together. Did I dare to unveil the depth of his pain? The truth was both a blade and a bomb, and I couldn't help but wonder which it would be. "Jackson," I managed, my voice barely a whisper. "There was another person in the car. They were hurt badly, but I don't know their condition now." His brow furrowed, pain coloring his features, but he leaned forward, desperate for more. "I need to know everything. Is it my fault? Did I can't lose anyone else." In that moment, I realized that the truth, however painful, was a spark that could either illuminate the darkness or ignite a destructive inferno. "You weren't in control, Jackson. The accident." It was just that. An accident. With trembling breath, I pressed on, searching for clarity amid the fog. But in the chaos, someone was injured. "We don't know how they are now." The silence that followed was filled with heavy uncertainty, shadows creeping back between us as he processed that reality, the weight of it pressing against his heart. "All I've ever wanted was to be better, to do better," he whispered, the anguish in his voice shattering the quiet. "And now, I have failed someone else, too." I watched as guilt flickered like a candle within him, moving, shifting, threatening to extinguish the light of hope we desperately held on to. But this wasn't a tragedy without an opportunity to rise from the ashes. I leaned in closer, desperation flooding my heart. "Jackson, this isn't about failure. It's about recovery. We can't change the past, but we can be here for the future." I took a breath, willing myself to keep him anchored in the present as he fought against the ghosts haunting him. "You are not alone in this. I'm right beside you." And then, just as our hopeful connection began to bloom, the lawyer stepped into the room, a man whose presence was as imposing as the weight of our lives felt, a slate of ice, eyes hardened by a world wrapped in money and tragedy. "Mr. Dalton," he began, drawing every eye, his voice cutting through our fragile moment, "I received news regarding the accident." My heart lurched, the air thick with anticipation and dread. What could this mean? Was there some deeper truth waiting just beneath the surface? The scalding ratio of justice tangled with consequences that could crush everything we had begun to weave together again. "I believe you should know," the lawyer continued, "the driver of the other vehicle survived but is facing significant challenges. Your family wishes to discuss the implications it has on all parties involved. There's a chance for potential litigation." Jackson's eyes widened, uncertainty and frustration intertwining in the depths of his gaze. The past was no longer simply a hazy memory, it was now a tide that could pull him under, threatening to wipe away any semblance of Hope we had fought for. Litigation? He echoed, and in that moment, the ground between us felt like quicksand, shifting, undulating beneath our feet, the bitter taste of guilt mixing with the undeniable need for connection, and I wondered if we had the strength to navigate this treacherous path that I never meant. He started, anguish rippling through his voice, but I cut him off, feeling a flicker of resolve igniting deep inside me. Jackson, listen. Erase the thing, you cannot carry the weight of responsibility for what happened. It was an accident and life isn't always fair. My heart raced as I caught Brianna's eyes, her silent support wrapping around us both. That in that moment, I saw a choice unfolding before him. We could either allow the world to drown out our fragile bond, suffocating our fight with guilt, or we could rise, reclaiming the strength within ourselves to push forward. You have a life to fight for, our life, your life. Focus on healing, on coming back to us. As his eyes flickered with uncertainty, something shifted within him, a spark igniting, fighting against the shadows that threatened to consume him. What if it's not enough? He whispered. What if they don't forgive me? My heart swelled at the layers of vulnerability beneath his bravado, struggled not only with guilt but with the haunting specter of the lost connection we once shared. We will face this together, Jackson. And I will fight beside you, no matter what we encounter. His gaze held mine, that once familiar warmth beginning to seep back, igniting the edges of the intimacy we had cherished, slowly yet surely, battling through the darkened barricades closing in on us. Maybe our path wasn't marked by clarity or certainty, but by the delicate fabric of hope woven into every word exchanged. That I want to fight, he finally declared, a fierce determination flickering back to life within him. For me. For us. The declaration felt like fireworks, each syllable bursting forth into the air, illuminating the stark darkness lurking outside our hospital room. Struggling through the churn of guilt and recovery wouldn't be easy, but it meant bridging the cracks that had formed in our foundation, and as I stood there, tethered to him by the unwavering thread of our connection, I realized the road ahead would demand resilience, forgiveness, and the willingness to embrace whatever came next. It wouldn't be devoid of challenges, but together, we would transcend the weight of the past. That in that luminous moment, a pang shot through my heart, a bittersweet reminder that love, woven through the fabric of our lives, could shield us from the uncertainties ahead. Would it lead us to forgiveness, healing, and acceptance, or would the ghosts of our choices reach out again, pulling us apart? In that fragile sea of emotion, I felt a gentle squeeze on my hand, and in that moment, I knew, whatever the future held, we would face it, together, and we would fight for each other, for our past, and for the promise of a new beginning.